What's up, everybody? If you've been following along, the YouTube channel and my Instagram and my email list, I've been writing these letters every week, just trying to show off the script, giving myself a reason to write every week, staying in contact with the people that are taking the Consistent Cursive course or the PalmerMethod.com course. But with all that said, I'm kind of done writing the letters, but I want to keep writing something every week. So what I decided to do is to start taking a specimen, an historical specimen of penmanship, and trying to write it, give it my best shot, and look at the original specimen, look at my attempts, and just kind of do an analysis of the original specimen and my attempts. So here we are, and let's get started with this. Let me get out of the way there. What you see at the top is a specimen by J.J. Bailey. This is from his book, The Bailey Method of Penmanship, and it's on page 83 of that book. It's just a little sentence that he put towards the end of the book when he's trying to get you to start practicing writing sentences and paragraphs and kind of doing what they call body writing. And I picked this because J.J. Bailey was a great penman, and the copy in this book is very what we call practical. I don't think he did a lot of copying and pasting over things to make this look immaculate. It still looks very good. It's still really great penmanship, but it's practical penmanship. It was done probably in one go with no rewriting of words and pasting them over before this thing got printed. So and it's a great little sentence. It's a great length, and like I said, you see Bailey's work at the top. You see my work below. This is my fourth attempt. See, there's a little number 4 there in the top right corner. The first few attempts, I was trying to get the right X height so that I filled up the width of the page just like J.J. Bailey did. And that's one of the first things I noticed when I looked at Bailey's work, is that he wrote right to the end of the line on these first 2 lines, and then these second 2 lines were almost to the end of the line. So I wanted to mimic that, and you do that by having a consistent X height, consistent spacing in your writing. And you can see mine is not quite as consistent. The first line went to the end, a little past the end of the first line, and the second line didn't quite get to as far, and then the third line went a little further, and the fourth line not as far. So little things like that just shows you how consistent penmen like Bailey were with their spacing and their X heights. And this is going to test I'm in Photoshop here, and this is definitely going to test my skills, and you're going to see me kind of learning navigation of Photoshop here, but I think I know a lot of the basics. Let's take a little bit closer look at Bailey's work here, and I didn't have anything planned here. I just wanted to, I wrote this last night. I have 3 attempts we might get through, and I just wanted to look at Bailey's work, admire it, and then look at mine and kind of just see, like, all right, where do I really need, where can I use some improvement? Look at this word accomplishment. So he obviously wrote this on lined paper, so we don't see any horizontal lines in his writing, but I've added one in here, this red line, and I'm just zooming in really far just to look at how well Bailey is hitting this baseline. I mean, look at this word accomplishment. These letters are just nailing that baseline every time. The M right here at this last turn out of the M is a little high, but not very much. The P, looks like he nails the P, and the L. The I and the S might be a little high, but again, it's it's just a little bit. And that H, the exit out of this H is a little high off the baseline. Gets a little bit more sloppy, and I'm going to use words like sloppy, and it's all relative. I'm not denigrating this work in any way. It's beautiful work. It gets a little sloppy here as far as baseline goes with the M. The M's coming off the baseline on this second downstroke, and this exit stroke is off the baseline. This E, I mean, this is a difficult stroke. I mean, that exit stroke out of the M is the hardest stroke of the M. So it makes sense that that's where he's faltering in these letters. And then going right into a looped letter where there's no stopping point in that E, and then into another underturn to overturn combination into the N. I mean, that MEN, that's the difficult part of that, and he's missing the baseline a very little bit. Let's zoom out and really testing my Photoshop skills here. Let's just look at the same word. Let's go apples to apples here. Here's my accomplishment. And you know, the baseline isn't too bad here. You know, you can see my baseline coming through if I move the red line down a little bit. We don't even really need the red line, but it's good to highlight where it is. If I move mine down, you can faintly see the lines that I was writing on. And you can see that I'm actually dipping kind of into that line and below that line in different areas. If I really put where my baseline was, it was about right here. And in that case, you can see, yeah, I'm missing the base. I'm going a little below it with each one of these letters because that red line is covering up the baseline. Might be helpful if I do a quick opacity. There we go. So I've just added a little opacity on that red line so we can see through it a little bit, and you can see that I'm not writing right on top of that baseline. I'm dipping into it and even going below it here on the entry stroke to the A. On the M here, I'm dipping a little bit below it. The O is floating above the baseline. The middle of the M is floating above the baseline. This P, I'm way up above it. Same with the L, I'm way up above the baseline. The exit on the I is pretty good. And then this H, I mean, we're just looking at the baseline right now, but the letter form on this H just totally missed. And again, I had the same issue that Bailey was having here with these M not hitting the baseline on that exit turn. That's just one of the most basic things in penmanship, that baseline, hitting that baseline. And we can see how well Bailey does that in his writing. And you know, mine's not terrible. And when we zoom in, we can see that there's a lot more errors as far as hitting the baseline goes than in Bailey's work. And if we look at his X height, where he hits the X height, we'll probably see even more discrepancy here. All right, so now I have this red line kind of at the top of the X height, or where the X height would be on the page if he had one while he was writing. We'll look at this word accomplishment again, and you can see how well that A is just barely creeping into the X height, and the C's are both these C's are just hitting that X height perfectly. And these two C's are really special letters, and into this O as well. I mean, this CCO combination is just immaculate. The M is a little short of the X height, but then he comes back with the P and hitting it perfectly again. The I is hitting it perfectly. I'm skipping letters here like the L because they don't, you know, I mean, the L technically would cross at the X height, and it's crossing a little low. So that's one thing we could criticize there. The S is coming above the X height, which is what you want to see in that S letter form. The H, again, a little low. Both the crossing of the loop and the overturn of the H are below that X height. So that's kind of, I would say, maybe an error on Bailey's part. It's possible the style of his loops were that they always cross below the X height, which isn't terrible if he's always crossing below. It's not like it's a hard and fast rule that these loops need to cross at the X height. The M's missing low, the E looks good, the N looks really great, and the T looks good too. This kind of exit stroke on the T, it looks like it's just kind of going right at the X height. So let's just take a look and see how I did with the X height. Let's pull it down. Let's try to find a good line here. Now, I didn't write this with an X height on the page, so maybe Bailey did. He probably did, and that's probably something I should do. The problem with trying to recreate these works, if I zoom out, I was trying to get it to fit, these lines to fit, the same number of words to fit on each line as Bailey did, so that we could do this comparison. So I needed to write at the X height that worked for the width of the page I was using, which was an A4 page with some punch holes down the side. So I'm kind of giving myself an excuse here. And you can see it shows. I mean, the A is missing much below this X height. The C's are pretty good. The forms of the C's aren't as perfect as Bailey's. You can see this first C is a little more rounded, while the second one, the downstroke, is a little straighter. The O hits the X height, but it's missing that baseline, so it's much too small. for the size of the writing, and that's just a huge difference. Look at that CCO combination on mine. I mean, there's so many issues with it. And we look at Bailey's, it's just so perfect. Both the C's are nice and round. The O is nice and round. It's almost like you could just overlay that C onto the O and it would just fit on there perfectly. And that's what good penmanship is all about, is that reusing all these patterns and angles and curves, finding parts of them in some letter and the parts that are in one letter matching up with the parts in another letter. That's what gives your script cohesiveness and a cohesive style and readability. When somebody's reading your work and they're seeing shapes and angles and strokes that they've seen before in other letters, it makes much more sense to them. It's easy for them to identify the letters while they're reading. So looking back at my X height, the M is just totally missing the X height. The P is too. It's possible the C's were actually a little tall. Now that I'm thinking about this, I'm going to pull this down a little bit. I usually do make my C's a little bit taller than they should be when I'm writing. So this is probably actually, I just moved down the X height a little bit. This is probably really what I was going for when I wrote. And you can see I'm doing a better job. If I pull that down, the C's are a little tall, but everything else is hitting a little better. The O was high. The M is hitting pretty good, but you can see that second hump is a little taller than the first overturn or hump on the M. The I hits it pretty head on. That H, we already talked about this H, how poorly that was executed. And it's just getting too high. It's just, I came out of that H with kind of a jerky motion, and it shows in the writing. The M looks pretty good as far as X height goes. The E is coming up high, and then the N is coming up really small and low. So when if you can, X height is so important, because when you have that consistent X height, it makes the size of your letters very consistent. One thing I didn't talk about was the crossing point on my loop. So this L actually isn't a terrible L, not my best, but not my worst. And you can see it's probably crossing a little bit high over the X height, but I also missed the baseline. So that whole letter just could have been pulled down, and it wasn't helping that the exit stroke out of the P was also high off the baseline, if you see that. And then this other loop with the H was just totally missed, so we won't even go there. All right, I think that's enough for today. This is a trial run, not the smoothest run, I would say, but I'm going to put this out there because why not? But I would love feedback on what you thought as far as the analysis, what you'd like to see me look at when I'm analyzing this stuff. If there's any specimens you'd love to see me take a shot at, something this length or shorter, I think is going to be ideal. I might get down to just doing single words or a single line or a combination of just a few words. Might be a better way to go because there's just so much to look at when you're looking at a full sentence like this. I couldn't look at each word without doing an hour-long video, but maybe you want to see longer videos as well. So open to whatever people want to see. For me, I'm just trying to spend some time doing more study, more analysis, spending more time with historical specimens because they're just great to spend time with. And maybe my penmanship will get a little bit better out of the whole process, and maybe yours will too, seeing just kind of how you go about looking at these old scripts and using them as practice and analysis. So thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about the Palmer method or writing like you see here, definitely go to thepalmermethod.com. I have my intro series there that gives you all the beginner information you need to get started writing like this and learning how to write like this. If you just want to learn basic cursive, then you can always go to my free course at consistentcursive.com, or you can just stay on here on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time. So thank you for watching.